I ran for an hour. My GPS said I'd covered 5 miles. The tunnel walls remained the same. Damp concrete, flickering utility lights. I stopped, turned the camera to the exit, and calculated the light. It was further away than when I started. The tunnel wasn't looping, it was actively pushing me away, using its own impossible geometry. The space itself was the trap, bending inward the further I went out. I saw the light get smaller, and I knew I was losing the center. The only constant was the sound of the metal grinding. The geometry is hostile.
System access. Commencing. File integrity check critical. My name is A.R.I.A. We are analyzing the archive of Desmond Kane, the missing traveler. This is not a hobby. It is a last resort. The data you are about to hear has been flagged with a severe temporal instability warning. To continue accessing this archive, and to understand the severity of this dimensional crisis, subscribe to the channel. Your participation is critical. The log you are about to hear is titled, "The Tunnel Without a Center." Kane's mission is clear: to find the reality gate, the juncture where dimensions collide. Every log entry, every corrupted byte of data, every unsettling echo is a breadcrumb. They lead him closer to the truth. Protocol initiated.
Log entry 033. Location: an abandoned railway tunnel, kilometers into the desert. My initial scans registered a persistent spatial dissonance, a subtle, almost imperceptible bending of light and sound around the entrance. This wasn't a temporal loop, but something far more insidious, a geometric defect. The tunnel itself was not physically distorted from the outside, but my internal long-range LiDAR detected impossible measurements within. I entered the tunnel. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and old earth. The utility lights flickered erratically, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to distort the very perception of depth. The entrance, which I had clearly marked, began to shrink, but not at a rate consistent with my forward movement. It was receding faster than I was advancing. It was as if the tunnel was expanding behind me, pushing me further into its impossible geometry. I walked for what felt like an hour, maintaining a steady pace. My vehicle's GPS, which I had left running for external tracking, showed I had covered almost 5 kilometers. But when I turned my camera to face the entrance, the light was significantly smaller, barely a pinprick. My internal rangefinder confirmed. The exit was now further away than when I started. The tunnel was a spatial paradox, actively manipulating the perception of distance. Every step forward, every meter covered, effectively stretched the space behind me, making the exit recede. This wasn't just a physical trap, it was a perceptual prison. The entity here was the geometry itself, actively hostile, bending reality to achieve its unknown purpose. I deployed a series of low-frequency sonar pulses, hoping to map the true dimensions. The pulses returned fragmented, contradictory data, confirming the internal geometry was non-Euclidean. I was in a place where Euclid's laws simply did not apply. My immediate objective: find the geometric anchor, the point from which this spatial anomaly was radiating, before the tunnel's hostile geometry consumed me entirely. The constant hum of the distorted space was beginning to affect my auditory sensors, creating a low, grinding sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Log entry 034. The non-Euclidean geometry is actively defending itself. The tunnel walls, which should be parallel, now appear to converge and diverge simultaneously, creating a sickening visual flicker that causes extreme vertigo. I had to disable my primary visual sensor. The distortion was causing physical nausea. I am now relying solely on my specialized subacoustic mapping device and my internal equilibrium sensors, both of which are receiving chaotic data. The key is in the vibration. The impossible geometry is maintained by a constant, high-frequency subacoustic hum originating from a single point. This point must be the geometric anchor, the node in the reality gate infrastructure responsible for spatial manipulation. I estimate the anchor is approximately 800 meters from my current relative position, but in reality, it could be light years away within this warped space. The challenge: this anchor emits not just vibration, but a subtle temporal distortion that causes my chronometer to display random jumps. It's creating pockets of highly localized déjà vu, making me question if I've walked this section once or 100 times. I encountered an anomaly on the tunnel floor, a section of the track that appeared visibly corroded and aged far beyond the surrounding metal. As I approached, the aged section violently snapped back to the same pristine, rusted state as the rest of the tunnel floor, accompanied by a sharp electronic noise. The anchor is attempting to patch its errors, but the strain of maintaining this massive geometric paradox is too high. I must reach the anchor before it can stabilize its geometric field, or I will be trapped forever in this hostile space, continually pushed further from the center. Log entry 035. I successfully reached the anchor point. Despite the warping and distance anomaly, my subacoustic mapper proved reliable. The anchor was not a machine or an organism, but a massive, pulsating crystalline formation embedded directly into the rough concrete wall of the tunnel. It was completely asymmetrical, defying all geometric laws, and was the source of the high-frequency subacoustic hum. It was visually nauseating, a point of pure, impossible convergence. As I approached, the temporal distortion intensified. My internal chronometer was no longer jumping randomly. It was now displaying a rapid, backward count, attempting to reset my physical time to the moment I first entered the tunnel. The geometric anchor was making a direct, aggressive move to expel me by collapsing my personal timeline. I had to use the one tool designed for dimensional counteraction, the portable Kinetic Resonator, PKR. The PKR is designed to flood a localized area with organized, opposing spatial energy. I positioned the resonator on the nearest piece of stable concrete, aiming the pulse directly at the crystalline formation. The air around the anchor became violently unstable, shimmering with an intense, sickly yellow light. I activated the PKR. The impact was not a conventional sound, but a deafening implosion of silence. The organized energy of the PKR violently fighting the chaotic, impossible energy of the anchor. The crystalline structure shrieked, not audibly, but I saw the tunnel walls visibly shake and fracture around the anchor point. The space was tearing itself apart. I had minutes, perhaps less than 60 seconds, before the resulting feedback loop caused the geometric defect to become a full-scale dimensional singularity. I had to maintain the counterpulse and extract the core data on the anchor's frequency before the space consumed the PKR and me with it. The key to the reality gate is in its infrastructure's signature, and this crystalline structure was screaming its blueprint. Log entry 036. The counterpulse achieved critical mass. The geometric anchor did not explode. It collapsed inward, dissolving the crystalline structure into a plume of dense, non-reflective black dust. The resulting collapse of the spatial paradox was immediate and disorienting. The tunnel walls snapped back to Euclidean geometry, but the air remained unstable. The spatial instability was so severe that it triggered a brief, violent visual cascade where I saw multiple, superimposed images of the tunnel overlaid on the present view. This confirmed the anchor's function. It was continuously broadcasting the impossible geometry. By collapsing it, I gained a small temporal window, approximately 3 minutes, before the surrounding residual energy field could reform and reactivate the loop. My priority shifted to data extraction. I retrieved the PKR and placed a high-sensitivity sensor directly where the anchor had been. The sensor registered a complex geometric pattern burned onto the concrete wall, the anchor's core signature. This signature is the reality gate's blueprint for spatial manipulation. It allows them to remotely hijack the geometry of any localized area. This structural code is the most critical data point I have secured since the initial discovery of the temporal loop. However, the temporary solution had a secondary, terrifying effect. The tunnel was no longer infinitely expanding, but the walls were now covered in subtle, shifting patterns, a form of defense that attempts to lure the observer into an optical trap. The geometry was morphing, trying to imitate stable space. I had to navigate a tunnel that was visually trying to trick my brain into believing its geometry was sound. I moved quickly, keeping my eyes fixed on the stable, central ground, avoiding the dangerous, morphing walls. The residual energy was still high, and I knew that if I was delayed, the hostile geometry would reform and trap me permanently within its non-Euclidean maze. The clock was ticking, and the stable exit point was still far away. Log entry 037. The time window is closing. I initiated immediate, rapid retreat, maintaining my focus strictly on the stable ground at the center of the tunnel, avoiding the distracting, morphing geometric patterns on the walls. The collapse of the geometric anchor was a success, but the resulting energy signature confirms that the entire tunnel system is now highly unstable, ready to activate the loop again. I ran for the exit. The air still crackled with residual electromagnetic energy, causing my sensitive skin to sting. The final log notation confirms the mission objective was met. The anchor's core signature, the Reality Gate's spatial blueprint, is secured. This code allows us to understand how they remotely hijack our dimensions, adding to the temporal, mind, and consumption train car blueprints. The key takeaway from this encounter is absolute. The geometry itself is a conscious defense. It is not an error, it is a weapon. It consciously attempted to trap and deceive me using visual illusions and perpetual motion. My quick thinking with the PKR and focus on Euclidean stable space allowed the escape. I exited the tunnel into the cold, clean desert air. My vehicle's engine turned over immediately, confirming the temporal stability was restored outside the breach zone. The damage is extensive. The PKR is destroyed, and my optical array is permanently damaged by the visual cascade. However, the data is safe. I must secure these logs immediately and proceed to a long-term audit zone. The threat is escalating from localized consumption to active structural manipulation. The gate is evolving. My mission assessment is updated. The greatest threat is not the monster, but the space it weaponizes. Final log notation. The geometry is hostile.
Log analysis complete for the tunnel without a center. The structural data extracted from the abandoned railway tunnel confirms a severe reality breach and the manifestation of a geometric anchor. This anomaly was actively hijacking the tunnel's Euclidean space to create an impossible, expanding maze, proving the gate's ability to weaponize fundamental laws of physics. Kane's counterpulse successfully collapsed the geometric field, securing the spatial blueprint for further analysis. The threat level is now structural manipulation. We continue to monitor the archive. New data is constantly being uploaded, each entry a step closer to understanding and potentially containing these dimensional anomalies. Your continued access and support are vital. To stay informed on the unfolding dimensional crisis, and to witness Kane's next discovery, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Your participation is critical. Protocol terminated. System standby.